can be here. Looks like Maggie,
We're good.
you're good to go. Okay, so wonderful. So I just unofficially introduced myself, but I suppose I can repeat myself for the recording. I'm Emily Bovier. I'm in the psychology department. We do have a little bit of a smaller group today, so I think at some point we'll be able to go around and you can introduce yourselves, or when we get to more of our discussion element, you can chime in, say who you are, what department you're in, what interests you have with respect to neurodiversity. So in terms of what we're going to do today, I'll share my screen briefly because I have some information just to help guide us. And Lynn is here and she's going to help me out with this discussion as well. So can everyone see my screen? Yes. Okay, excellent. So in terms of what I would like to do today, this particular session on supporting neurodiverse students, after talking with Lynn, we decided it would be a really good strategy to sort of break out of the more academic framework for considering pedagogies for neurodiverse students, and instead think of it more from a personal perspective. So the goal of this session is to offer those personal perspectives on supporting neurodiverse students, whether or not you have worked with neurodiverse students before, whether or not you have family members or friends who have a neurodiverse condition that may give you some unique insight. It'd be great to be able to hear people's personal perspectives. And so the main goal, again, in sort of breaking out of this textbook framework, is to consider our students as people with individual differences, and how we can treat those individual differences as assets to set people up for success. So I can provide a very brief background on neurodiversity for folks who aren't terribly familiar with what we mean by that term. We'll probably focus mainly today on autism and ADHD. But the main goal, what I'm most interested in, is just having an open dialogue regarding personal experience with neurodiversity. And so the purpose of having more of this open dialogue is to help motivate people to participate in the inclusive teaching initiatives that we have and view those inclusive pedagogies through the lens of neurodiversity. So we know that inclusive teaching practices are beneficial to all students, but when you look at it through that lens of understanding how it can specifically be beneficial to neurodiverse students, it can help with that intrinsic motivation to continue to apply those practices. And also, if anyone has any inputs about next steps to help continue this initiative, please feel free to speak up about what resources would be helpful for you, any challenges that you may have faced, and so on. So I'll just click through a couple slides here just to give everyone some context. And then what I'll probably do is I'll stop sharing my screen so that I can see everyone, and then we can have a chat about some of our personal experiences. So in terms of creating equity in the classroom for neurodiverse students, there's a lot of practices that are relevant to this. So we know that inclusive teaching and universal design for learning are very applicable to supporting our neurodiverse students. There's also a term, culturally relevant pedagogy, which basically is trying to include disability, or another way I like to frame it is just individual differences, as part of that initiative. So designing courses and considering disability as a form of diversity, if you will. In terms of different models of disability, I know there was a workshop on this for this breakout session, but essentially what this entire initiative lines up with is the idea that the social model of disability refers to the fact that people are not disabled by their conditions, quote unquote, per se, but the way in which society structures environments, circumstances, for our perspective, classroom environments and policies, the way those structures are put in place, that is what creates the disability for an individual, as opposed to their particular circumstances themselves. So by considering the social model of disability, it helps us break free of that ableist perspective and look at how can we, in our case, design our courses or college-based experiences to ensure that we're setting people up for success. This has implications for a sense of belongingness, persistence and retention in college, and just promoting social justice, among many other things. So in terms of what we're talking about as far as neurodiversity, essentially what we're considering are students who have invisible disabilities. As I mentioned today, we'll probably most likely just focus on autism spectrum disorders and ADHD, but this can also include things like anxiety and mood related disorders, learning differences, and intellectual disabilities. So the whole goal of this initiative is to move beyond a deficit model and to stop thinking about these students as having deficits, but instead looking at ways to set them up for success, focus on their assets, focus on their individual differences, and design our courses and college-based experiences to ensure that they're not facing unique challenges. So I'll give a brief overview. This is just some food for thought. We can start by talking about autism disorders in general. So I'll leave this up here for a minute and then just talk a little bit about students with autism spectrum disorders. And then I'll close out my screen and then we can just have a conversation with each other about any personal perspectives that we would like to share. I will say that I have a brother who has autism. He is 36 now. He did not attend college, but my personal experiences and understanding him as an individual have really helped me in terms of thinking about my students who are neurodiverse or who might have autism spectrum disorder. So as I mentioned, it's really important to focus on strengths of individuals. And so individuals who have autism oftentimes have very strong memory. They're very focused and dedicated. They have high analytic skills, remarkable powers of observation. They're very sincere, very impartial, and willing to listen to other people. So it's important to focus on, even if you think about clinical psychology in general, there tends to be a deficit model in identifying what are people's problems, but it's also really important to focus on how they might have individual differences that contribute to strengths. In terms of challenges that students may face, and I'm sorry, my cat is about to jump on the desk and make an appearance. Yep, I knew that was coming. Challenges that individuals with autism spectrum disorder that they might face include things like sensory reactivity. So lights and sounds can be very distracting or lead to sort of an overreactive response. They're very hypersensitive to changes in routine. They may have challenges reading body language or facial expression. They may have comorbid anxiety and depression, which oftentimes might come from the challenges of being a neurodiverse person in a world that is designed for neurotypical people. Students might have doubts about disclosing whether or not they have autism. And oftentimes there's a high amount of stress because these individuals are very self-aware and they might be very vigilant to how they themselves are different from neurotypical people. And that level of self-awareness can cause a lot of distress or loneliness, feelings of isolation, and things like that. So I'm going to stop my screen just so that I can see everyone. Okay, wonderful. And my cat is still participating, so I'm trying to keep him off screen, but he's here for this. So Lynn, how about you start by introducing yourself, since you're sort of my co-session leader in this.
Sure. Yeah, I'm
great.
just helping out, but
Yeah.
I'm Lynn Blanchfield. I'm in the Department of History. I'm also the Fulbright program advisor on campus. My older son is 23 and he has autism. He was diagnosed when he was 5. He finished college just last year and he's in a graduate program at CUNY studying psychology, studying a PhD in psychology, and he's studying autism actually. So his special interest, and as Emily knows, and maybe some of you know, a lot of people with autism have special interests, and his special interest is autism. So if you ask him anything about autism, he will tell you everything about autism. And that has an advantage. But I totally agree with Emily. I'm really glad that Emily is doing this because I've learned a lot being a parent of a child with autism. But I'll leave you with this comment that my son made to me, and I'm sure some of you already know, I'm sure Pat knows this and Emily knows this as well, is that my son likes to say, when you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. They're all completely different. And just as we treat our neurotypical students as individuals, as we should, I've also learned that you should treat, all of our neurodiverse students as well as other students as individuals. And what might help one student with autism may not necessarily help another student, but I would encourage you to at least try. And if you, need some help, I've talked to other faculty members and just say, maybe you can try this, maybe you can try that, maybe, maybe there's different ways you can help people, and you just got to keep trying, and just see what works. So thanks, Emily.
Absolutely. Does anyone else want to just jump in, introduce themselves, offer up any of their perspectives or reasons why they're here? I won't call out anybody, but if you want to jump in, please. Yes. Maggie knows my cat Cinco. He's getting lots of love in the chat. He's really showing off right now. This is rare for him. Anyone else want to jump in? Yeah, Linda, I see your hand up.
I wanted to attend the one that was in the fall, but I couldn't. So I'm glad that they're offering it now when I'm able to attend. And I've had some students that are neurodiverse, and it's kind of like I get students and I I get surprised with things all the time. I don't know what it is, but like one semester I had I was teaching English 102, and the class was capped at 19, and 8 of my students were Korean exchange students. They had no warning. So it's like these things seem to happen with no warning. So, yeah, I'm just concerned about being able to work with these students and help the other students in the class be able to work with the neurodiverse students better. Or I mean, I haven't had a problem really up to this point, because we kind of just deal with everyone as an individual, and I tell them, kindness goes a long way, and if you have a problem with somebody or something, you need to let me know. And I'm pretty like alert to if something's happening or whatever, but I haven't had any issues, but I don't want to have any issues. So or if I have any, I want to be able to address it. I had a student that it seems like he keeps taking my classes, so that's a good sign. I guess we have a good rapport or whatever. One thing I notice is like sometimes, and I believe he has autism. He's on the autism spectrum. I don't know that for sure, but meeting the requirements of the course while also having them work in what their area of talent or expertise is. This individual is very creative, and his writing is just like, I mean, I shared it with another colleague because it made me calm for the end of the semester because it was so beautiful, but I needed him to also fit the assignment. So it was like a kind of thing like that, with trying to work with his abilities and what's required, and have it be the same as other students as well, but I'm not making out of the way special accommodations that make the course no longer the course. Yeah,
and and even just bringing up the term accommodations, right? So I think one goal with this initiative is to help faculty design their courses to be inclusive, so that there is flexibility within the courses that then does not require students to get outside accommodations if things like disclosure can be a source of stress or feelings of stigma for students. So let's take hypersensitivity to routine or changes, right? So if you think about the way in which you design your course, and ensuring that your course is organized with consistent structure in it, that's going to be very beneficial for students who are neurodiverse. If there has to be a change, think about how that might impact a student differentially who is on the autism spectrum, and that is when they might need some sort of additional accommodation that other students might not necessarily need to set them up for that same level of success. If you have to make a change to due dates for a project, or even the process through which the student has to navigate through the project. That can be, as an example, I teach a seminar course, and as part of the course structure, sometimes a class day would be canceled so that students could meet with me individually throughout that class period. So change to the course structure. And even though it was anticipated and it was on the syllabus, it's still such a unique change from the course structure that that student had challenges wrapping their head around that and missed our individual meeting. And so if you think about if you impose consequences for missing a meeting, right, that has to be different for a student who is neurodiverse. I just offered this student an opportunity to make up that meeting and we rearranged it. So that is a legitimate, thing to consider about how students who are navigating your course with neurodiversity, it's going to present a very unique challenge for them. And a lot of times, like thinking about it through this lens can help you have empathy for just all students in general. But it's good to think about some of these more specific examples relative to students with autism. Does anyone else have any points that they want to share or questions that they have about autism or working with students with autism? Magdalena, you went unmuted. Do you have a question or comment? There you are.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering, and this applies, I guess, in particular to students with autism, but also to just students who are just shy. Every once in a while, I teach a course where I would really like to incorporate student presentations.
This is a great thing to talk about. Yeah.
Yeah, and students who are shy for whichever reason will be very reluctant to do that. And I mean, one way to do that is to just give them accommodation and say, okay, well, you can just present this for me, instead of big audience. On the other hand, I think it's very important for them to learn to do that and to go outside of their comfort zone. So does anybody have experience with, how to address, what is the sort of balance here?
Well, actually, my suggestion actually comes from Pat. So thank you, Pat. I had this similar issue with a student who had severe anxiety about presenting. And in the hopes of keeping it equitable, I said, no, you can't get out of the presentation. But I allowed this student, it was a group presentation. I allowed the student with their group mates to video record their presentation. And I said, but here's a caveat, you actually have to go up to the front of the class with your group. And if people have questions afterwards, you have to answer them. I said, you can't just sit down and be in the back and just pretend that you didn't present. You have to claim ownership of this, right? You have to be there. And she agreed. And I think it was a good balance. So thank you, Pat, for that suggestion.
How did it go, Lynn?
Actually, it went very well. I think it was, I didn't have any complaints from students saying, oh, that they, took advantage of anything. People did have questions of them. And I think they did a good job of answering them. But it actually worked out fine. And I think their presentation was just as good or not so good as everybody else's. Yeah. So it worked out really well, actually.
Good.
I don't know if anyone else has had that experience.
I will say that with presentations, that tends to be a really big one to consider. And I think the moral of the story, from what I've learned from all of my course assignments or structure in general, is just flexibility. If you build flexibility into your course, it does not, you're not singling out a student who might need a particular accommodation by only allowing it for that one person, but you're providing opportunities for other students. And I know it takes extra work to design it in an equitable way. For presentations in my class, I gave students the option to do them in person or online. And I ended up with about a 50-50 split. I was pretty surprised, right? And so I didn't feel as though students were trying to take advantage of the online component. It didn't appear as though one option was easier than the other option. One thing, and interestingly in that class, the student who identified as having autism chose to do the in-person one. So with respect to that, though, I will say one of the assignment components that I had for that course was that students had to provide a summary of the discussion points that followed their presentation. as a way to sort of cap off the presentation. And I'm so proud of this student for speaking up, and it's something that I didn't think of in the moment, and I'm so glad he brought this up. But he's like, can I write their points down for discussion? Because of his autism, he's perfectly intelligent and capable, but processing multiple discussion points from students in real time to be able to then digest them afterwards and write a cohesive summary put him at a unique disadvantage compared to other students. And so we simply just had all students write their comments on index cards, and we did it for all students, not just him, so that everyone had, even though they were participating in real time with the discussion points and responding in real time, which is a good professional skill to have, all the students then at least had those written comments to help support them with the writing component that came afterwards. So a lot of times it is things that you might have to adjust in the moment, and just if you have that framework for just recognizing where a challenge might pop up and be flexible, then that's what's going to help set students up for success. Donna, do you have a hand up?
Yeah, my name's Donna Green. I'm in the Department of Graphic Design, and presentations are what we do all semester long. And that is something that I come across, and I try to explain to the students that it's not just it's not just good enough to have an idea. You have to be able to describe your idea and sell your idea. And a lot of times what we do is we start small. We start in small groups. Every project, they start with a group of 3. So by constantly at different processes of their project, by describing to that group what they've done, they start to become a little bit more familiar with how to present the materials. And then when it comes time for the final presentation, I still have some with jitters, but oftentimes I find that the ones that are really shy or hesitant, they want to do it first and get it over with. So I give that option, and I let them say, you tell me if however you want to do, rip the Band-Aid off and do it first. Or I always say, who wants to go? And a lot of times I'll get emails ahead of time and they'll say, can I go first? And then that helps. And by the end of the semester, I do see big improvement because we have 3 projects. So they've done this process 3 times throughout the semester. But it's one of those things that they can tell me a different way that they want to present. I'm always open to however you want the end result to be, but it's part of the best practices of our business. So they have to know how to present, so that they have to practice that. So like I said, little bites. And then eventually over the course of the 3 or 4 years in our program that they've been doing it, they start to become more confident. And that's the big part, is the confidence.
Yeah, very true. And, a lot of the things that you alluded to align with just basic inclusive teaching practices. So I'm sure everyone knows at this point that there's an inclusive teaching reading group through CELT this spring. And so for those that might be new to considering what it's like for neurodiverse students, if you engage in that reading group, even if the strategy is not specifically referencing neurodiverse students, it's great to be able to think about ways in which that would be a benefit to students who have neurodiversity of some form. Any other points that you want to raise about autism or questions that you have? I have a few others that I could add to the mix, but wanted to check in with the group as well. Okay. One thing I do want to talk about is one of the challenges that students with autism might face is reading body language and facial expressions. And so this ties into, and it was taking me a second to remember the term, but the hidden curriculum, right? So if we are expecting students to have a learning experience that are based on things like body language, facial expressions, group work, tone of voice, things like that, there might be things that students who are neurodiverse miss out on, that we are inadvertently excluding them from if we are relying on things like humor to convey a point, sarcasm to convey a point. I am a very facially expressive person, and I use my hands a lot, and I have to be wary and make sure that the point I am trying to get across is not simply conveyed through those expressions, because there might be students who miss out on that opportunity. So I think it's a really good thing to consider areas in which we might have that hidden curriculum in our courses, where students might miss out on that, or if there is a bulk of group work that's happening. And if group work happens to cause significant distress to a neurodiverse individual, and by this we can even mean people who have extreme anxiety, right? So I'm sort of couching anxiety and depression sort of under this neurodiverse umbrella as well, even though we're talking about it in the context of autism. So does anyone have any thoughts about that, or has anyone experienced anything related to body language or facial expression, or even how you evaluate your students in presentations, right? Like whether or not they are making eye contact with the group. Is that part of someone's evaluation for whether or not someone's effectively engaged in their presentation? Any thoughts? I know my brother does that. Like I'll be talking to him about something and I think he's not listening to me. And I'll be like, are you even listening to me? And he'll just sort of sigh and turn and make eye contact with me to accommodate his neurotypical sister, because he's learned what signs and signals neurotypical people tend to need to understand their point of view. Nicole, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Nicole Westerdahl. I'm in the library, and that really resonates with me, because I think one of the hardest things for me when I first started teaching was looking out at the class and seeing people that did not seem to be paying attention to me, and recognizing that those could be the people who are actually absorbing the most information, because then afterwards I'd hear them explain the concepts to someone else in like better terms than I could use. And I was like, wow, they got that from me. So I think recognizing it in the moment has been helpful, not only for how I'm engaging with the class, but for me to assess how the overall class went. So although I don't think it comes up for like grading, because as a librarian, I thankfully don't do that. But it definitely has impacted my classroom interactions, really recognizing that that is not a way to judge whether or not someone is engaged or paying attention or listening.
Great. Any other thoughts or comments with regard to that?
I just want to say it's not just about neurodiversity, but I think culture comes into that. Like Americans like to smile a lot. People from some other countries, not necessarily. So might, those people might come off as sort of hostile. Took me a while to get used to that. Like, why are you smiling?
Sure.
I get into this country. So I think for international students, that might also be a thing.
Yeah. The hidden curriculum is also relevant to international students. And that's why if you think about inclusive teaching and culturally relevant pedagogy more broadly, even though your intention may be to, okay, I want to consider this for neurodiverse students, or I want to consider this for intellectual or international students, it then covers so many more bases than you may realize, right? So if anything, it's more, a lot of the purpose of this session is to help people empathize more with students with individual differences, whatever they may be, and try to provide that intrinsic motivation for engaging in some of those inclusive teaching practices. Yeah. Go ahead, Lynn.
Yeah, I just think it's also important that that it's okay to ask a student about what's going on. I've had students who stare out the window in the entire class, and then I stop them before they leave class and chat with them individually and say, I see you're staring out the window all the time. What's going on? They're like, yeah, I can't look at you. I can't look at anybody else, but I stare out the window and that helps me focus. Or somebody who was looking at images on their phone during lecture. And I said, okay, what's going on there? And they said, well, it helps me to focus. And I said, okay, but it would have been helpful had you said something at the beginning of the semester. One thing I did last year and the year before, and I intend to do this again this semester, is I asked all the students to fill out a little card for me with their name and their preferred names, preferred pronouns, their major, and anything specific that they wanted to tell me that might enable me to help them in the course. And of course, with larger classes, like I have a 90-person class this semester, I'm going to have them do it, but it's going to be hard to remember everybody, but at least I'll have some idea of like, okay, what are some of the issues that I have to be aware of in the classroom. And there's nothing wrong, I think, with talking to students individually after class and say, I've noticed this about you. Is there something I can do to help you? What's going on? And is there a way I can help you be more engaged if you're not engaged? And sometimes they're just having a bad day. I spoke to some student who was doing something with his phone. He's like, yeah, I just broke up with my girlfriend and I'm really upset. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm really sorry. So who knows what's going on with them, but those are some good suggestions.
Yeah, and I know that's more difficult to manage in a larger class where faculty have cell phone policies or consequences for using a cell phone. I've even had faculty who, I've also noticed that I have students who have earbuds in a lot in my class, right? And I have not told them to take them out because I think about there might be some folks who, I know my brother wears headphones to help sort of diminish some external noise and help him stay focused. And so there's lots of things to consider about cell phone use or headphone use or having a hoodie up or something like that might bring someone comfort and focus that we might not understand quite yet. Lisa, I see your hand up.
Thanks. So in my role in advisement, I know Nora is also in a similar role as myself. I'm trying to think about ways, a lot of what everyone is speaking about makes sense in terms of pedagogy and designing instruction and flexibility in the classroom. But the way we interact with our students is more on a one-on-one basis, and it's not necessarily curriculum based as it is helping guide them to advocate for themselves with resources on campus. And so this is raising awareness for me in terms of, there may be a student who has social anxiety. So telling them to approach a faculty member to discuss whatever's going on in class might be a bigger ask than what I may realize. So I guess this has got my wheels turning about how can we start thinking about how to tailor interactions with students from an advisor or other support service on campus where we work with students in a different capacity than in the classroom and account for those differences. So I think this will be something we can continue to weave into our conversations for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate considering it from that perspective as well, because even though we tend to talk about coursework and course design and things like that, we know that the ability to succeed in college is not just dependent on the classroom environment. It's so many other factors, like the ability to live independently and social support and social networks. And so, if you consider when you're advising a student in some capacity, even if it's advisement relative to the courses themselves, that's it's another layer to consider how to help support those students. And you're right that it might be a bigger ask than we might realize to have someone to advise someone to approach their professor about something. So I see there are some things in the chat. Maggie, you want to go ahead and
Yeah, sure. So
share your thought?
there was kind of a little bit of conversation about wearing the earphones or headphones and such. And I just wanted to share, especially, and it came up in the reading group this past semester, the Remembering and Forgetting in the Age of Technology. And we talked a lot about distractions and things that we might perceive as distracting, right, in this particular context of thinking about neurodiverse students may not necessarily be the kind of it might be something that helps ground people and keep them focused. And so, in the process of, the reading group, I spent a lot of time just talking with my students about, what does it mean to be focused? Like, how do we, what ways when we realize we're not focused in class, do we work to get back to that focus in class? And anyway, so I wanted to share that it was my hope, to really start drafting these course expectations and policies together with my students so that, we give everybody the opportunity to say, I would like a little break in between class, just, 2 minutes to just refocus, or, just to draw our attention in some particular way back to course conduct, or, content and so forth. And so I think, part of at least my interest in creating a inclusive classroom environment is really involving students in those kinds of decisions. And of course, some students may not be comfortable disclosing why they might need certain considerations in the class. And so maybe it's a combination of in-class discussion with, surveying students outside of class about, any particular needs, or, things like as it relates to a cell phone policy or something to that effect. So I just, wanted to share that as well. I think a lot of people have hands up.
Yeah, well, I do like the idea of including students in that conversation of setting course expectations. And then also with the consideration that like some students might not be vocal, but if you couple that with Lynn's strategy of getting information from students in a private format through that, information sheet at the beginning of the semester, you as the instructor can then sort of combine the perspectives and then make that final, advocacy for what you want to, or how you want to set the tone for those course expectations. Yeah, I think that's great. There was a hand up, but now I've lost it.
Donna?
It was me.
Okay, there we go.
I just wanted to share a couple things about during class lecture and during class presentations that maybe it's a graphic design or an art thing. Excuse me, but I encourage doodling, and a lot of the students carry with them their pads all the time. Little pads. I always have paper in the front of the room. And I find that that allows them to be able to focus on what's being said while they've got their hands busy. And I always, when I present my presentations, I always record my presentations ahead of time and put that up and give them the slideshow of what I'm presenting. So I always encourage them not to be taking notes, but to be focusing on the interaction of the conversation at that moment. And I find that a lot of the students, and again, I don't know because I only teach art, but graphic design, I find that a lot of students are more attentive when they've got their hands busy doodling. Just that I'd share.
Yeah, that's like a mindfulness-based activity that can help students. I oftentimes do that at the start of class, give students a few minutes, a chance to settle in however it works for them, whether they close their eyes for a second or doodle or wrap up their cell phone conversation or whatever they're doing on their phone. And so that, to understand that there are diverse ways in which people can ground themselves or can focus themselves. So having that flexibility and encouraging that is a good strategy too. So we have about 5
I would
minutes.
also add, just if I can say that we're talking about how people are having trouble focusing, but one thing I've noticed about some students with autism is that they hyper focus. And so, for example, my son on several occasions would get an assignment, in college and say, I don't know where to start. And because he thinks they're all important. Everything is important. And so if everything in the assignment is important, what should be a 4 to 5 page paper turned into like a 20-page paper. And I'm like, no. So there needs to be, sometimes they have difficulty and they hyper focus and they zoom in on one thing that is so minor in your mind when you're presenting that, but they think is the most important thing. So there's, one thing that I noticed with some students with autism, and I don't know if this happens with students with ADHD, but I know for at least my son or for other students, they would hyper focus on things. And then I'd have to say, no, that's not the most important aspect of this assignment. This is, and I can recall actually having to tell students and giving them like a list of saying, this is the most important. This is number 1. This is number 2. This is number 3. This is number 4. This is number 5. And giving them very, very precise instructions. Or wrapping up at the end of the class and say, so what was the most important aspect of what we talked about today? Because for some students, they think everything's important. Like my son just thought every aspect of the lecture or every aspect of the reading was important. And then they missed the big picture. So that's something else to consider, just to throw that out there.
Yeah, I think that's really important for assignments, whether it's even something as simple as what we perceive as simple, a reading assignment, right? Read this 2-page paper. And then, but if, you know, providing that high structure in terms of here's, you know, when you give a reading assignment, give some guiding questions or guiding points to help them develop that skill of picking out what's the important point of the assignment. So that high structure applies for assignments, whether it's simple as reading or more advanced as a final term paper where they need that scaffolding and that example of this should take you X amount of time, or this should take you on average, you know, 3 to 4 pages. And then the great thing is that high structure benefits all students, right? So that's the great part about all of this. And it might, you know, alleviate some of those last minute student questions that we might get as the assignment nears as well. So I know we only have 2 minutes left, but I just wanted to thank everyone for coming today and for being part of the conversation. If anyone has any follow-up points that you'd like to address with myself, or feel free to reach out to Lynn as well. We're always here to help. We're always here to talk things through. And I'd really like to keep this initiative going. One thing that I know that is really effective for students who are neurodiverse is to have a peer support network. So I know Lisa had to duck out, but if, you know, we were able to form some sort of neurodiverse peer support group through advising, that might be really fantastic. I just learned that SUNY Empire is designated as a college that is supportive for neurodiverse and autistic students. And so maybe we could work towards something like that at this university. I think it would be really great. But we also need to hear from you about what would be helpful for you and what you might need to best support students. So if you think of things, please feel free to send them along and we'll just try to keep this going.
And I think we're only going to have more students with these issues in the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I just dropped in the chat that, you know, if anyone's interested, there are sessions tomorrow on designing an inclusive course. And so, you know, if you're, you know, interested in coming to that conversation, you know, thinking about neurodiverse students and how to incorporate some of those best practices for inclusion in the classroom, and you know, those will be really good opportunities to think about your classes in more depth.
Yeah, very good. All right. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.